Who am I? Most of you know me already. I am a veterinarian. I got my veterinary degree in 1987 in Germany, and I went into science for a few years at the faculty. I got my veterinary degree. They have an Institute of Pharmacology and Herbology. And in addition to my veterinary education, I was so thoroughly educated in nutrition because in Germany, the veterinarians are also nutritionists for the FDA equivalent, and they control food production. So they are requested to know what goes into the animal and why. So we are thoroughly educated in nutrition over about 2 years, where the United States education for veterinarian gets specialized very early on, and they have 1 week in those 5 years, and that is mostly optional to take the nutrition classes. My PhD was in pharmacology, and I had herbalism alongside. And then later on, I went into practice. I worked at a colic surgery clinic. I did colic surgery for a short amount of time. I did not find this very satisfying for myself, and it was very frustrating to me. I always had the intention to prevent those emergencies as much as I could, and I found myself more teaching at the truck than actually getting my day done with treating. And that ultimately led to my recognition that I'm a better coach and educator in areas that help horse owners keep their horses healthy and lead them back to health with natural solutions. I had a racing stable at some point. This is kind of a picture in the middle. My racehorses taught me a lot about nutrition and performance in the equine performance industry. And I do give lectures and speeches and seminars across the country. Here on the right, this was at the Horse Expo. In the meantime, I do not use the DVM, although I have a DVM. The German abbreviation is the same. But in the United States, this stands for a licensed practicing veterinarian, and I am not licensed in any state. I do not practice veterinary medicine per se. I work with a lot of veterinarians, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later. My other globally areas of expertise are equine performance, nutrition, herbalism, pharmacology as well, and we'll dive into these different areas today, each a little bit. I do remote consultations all over the planet, and that usually works very, very well. Horse health coaching is an expression that I coined, and where it positions itself is between veterinary medicine and nutrition. It is not either one. It is not just nutrition, because nutrition per se applies general principles to the animal, no matter what the individual situation is, no matter where they are. What I found is it is very important where your horse is in the United States, because it will impact their health depending on how the soil consistency and condition is where you're at. So often when you move your horse all of a sudden gets issues and nobody can explain them. So I look at the horse, at your history, and I'm your consultant, and I bring nutritional principles into the equation. I also use my veterinary knowledge. Nobody can take that away out of my brain. It is what it is, whether with licensing or without. My brain is my brain, and that's my experience. So I give that to you. That is your knowledge and your expertise when I work with you. So we do this in teamwork. And how does this work? So the veterinary treatment is symptomatic, right? So you have a symptom like elevated ACTH levels, and there's a drug that tries to eliminate that symptom. But there's a reason why the symptom actually showed up. So if you go deeper down to that bottom of the iceberg, I personally have identified a handful of root causes that then spread out into various symptoms on the surface that really more or less depend on the personal sensitivity of the horse. But ultimately, it goes back to common root causes that we're going to today briefly address. Let's go to our topic today, equine Cushing's. It's also called PPID. It was actually renamed in 2007 or 2008. The question is, and I took this from the flyer, what is it actually? Does the medication have any side effects? Are there alternatives? Can my horse heal from it? And are there other look-alike conditions? It has become an epidemic where this condition was very rare about a decade and a half ago. And today I see that when I see a group of, let's say, 20 horses, about 4 or 5 of them are in average on this medication. So what do we consider Cushing's symptoms? And in the Q&A, I'm going to ask you if anybody, you would not be on this lecture if you didn't have any interest in it. So you probably have a horse, or you know somebody that has a horse that has been diagnosed with Cushing's symptoms. I chose here in this slide 2 horses that would be considered typical, actually only one, the bottom one. The left top, the white horse, is simply overweight, massively. And then the top right is actually a thoroughbred diagnosed with PPID, and that does not fit into the original traditional category of Cushing's definitions of symptoms: non-shedding, overweight, cresting neck, low energy. Well, we can debate this in the thoroughbred, the way she's standing there. And then laminitis. So we're going to go deeper into those symptoms and question them today. So here are some demos. What am I actually talking about? How do I know here what I'm talking about? Where did I get my data information? And I want to thank every horse owner here that I've worked with in the last 2 decades that were willing to go down this route, to go the extra mile, and to give this a shot. Here are a few, actually 4, PPID diagnosed horses. And those horses were all on medication, and they did not do well on it. So the horse owner had the desire to do something else. This is this is 11 years ago, June 2013. So you can see a little bit how long we have been doing this. And the difference is June 2013, August 2013. So this was about 6 to 8 weeks. And this is in average the time it takes to turn the hormonal levels around, and in particular, to turn the clinical problems around. And this is why I'm calling it PPID turnaround. This horse was recently in Kentucky, remotely coached. And the left side is February 2024. This horse actually had signs of laminitis, and we'll be doing this case. So what I do is I attempt to work with a veterinarian. I always reach out and team up. I've worked with Wood and Whittle. I've worked with clinics in Florida. So the clinics usually are, open to inviting the nutritionist. In that case, I am labeled as a nutritionist because they want to be the veterinarian. That's fine. And so we have discussions about what are we going to do here? And as long as there's medication needed, as long as the horse is under veterinary care, there's nothing you can do about weaning off the medication. And to be honest and very direct here, if your horse has symptoms such as pain or discomfort, you need to use the medication. So I'm not anti-medication. I am there's no effect without a side effect. And the other part of this mission statement is first, do no harm. We all have sworn the oath of Hippocrates as medical experts, as veterinarians. And for me too, is first do no harm to the horse. So if there's something where you have to weigh out the side effects and the effects, if my side effects are bigger than the effect, why using then the medication, right? If I do more harm than any good. Here is demo case 3. So on the left side, this is the same horse. Yes, it's I don't know if Leah is online. She can confirm. We worked on this in South Carolina together. This is her pony on the left side in April, and I think I got the times right. If not, Leah, if you hear me, let me know if I got the months right. But it was just a few months apart. It's usually 1 or 2 months apart. And you can see here a tremendous change in phenotype of this horse, right? She has lost weight. She has shed. You can say, okay, I was probably another season, but on the left side, we have green grass as well, so it couldn't be deep winter. It is absolutely possible. So horses have this incredible ability to be able to change really quickly, and that has helped them to survive in the wilderness. They have the ability to heal really, really quickly and change their endocrine status as well quickly and their weight. Another case here, this is actually a thoroughbred mare. And you can see also here, obviously, the color change. This is a mineral deficiency. This horse was diagnosed with PPID, had elevated ACTH levels. And here you can also see again March to May, 2 months in between, about 8 weeks. You can see the dramatic change now. This horse didn't have to lose a lot of weight, obviously, to the contrary, but you can see the change in muscle tone, change in color, and also change in overall, as far as we can tell from the pictures, overall attitude and demeanor. What usually eliminates the PPID symptoms in the pictures you saw and the testimonials is to remove the root causes that are underlying those issues. And what is commonly happening, we're going to go through the process here in a moment, is something else. But in the current PPID diagnostic, nobody actually looks at the underlying root causes. For instance, if you have a horse that is not shedding, most likely their thyroid is low. And what horses do is, because they cannot dress warmer, the thyroid is responsible for how warm we feel or how cold we feel. It regulates the internal metabolic energy in the body. So if there's a horse with a low thyroid function, this horse cannot put a jacket on, so they will just not shed because they need their coat to stay warmer. It's very difficult to measure core body temperature in horses. In humans, you can do this first thing in the morning before you get up. But when are we going to do this with a horse? But normally, they do have about a degree of lower body temperature. So another reason for the PPID symptoms could be a reduced adrenal activity. We're going to go into this in a moment. Local mineral imbalances, as I mentioned earlier, the soil in the United States has very different mineral profiles, and they can impact the horse's health. I think next week's webinar is going to be on those mineral issues. Then stress, and in particular nutritional stress, if your horse is not getting enough amino acids or something else is imbalanced, your horse can have PPID symptoms. Now, I'm sorry for this overloaded graph here or picture. This is important for you to know because otherwise you might wonder, why is she so cautious and explaining herself here? What is going on and why am I giving you these data today is this. After I had been so successful, or we, the horse owner and I, and this has happened hundreds and if not thousands of times over, many horse owners decided to not use their medication anymore, and they discontinued because the horse didn't need it. And some of them had their veterinarians measure the ACTH levels and they were normal. A lot of them said, you know what, my horse doesn't have an issue anymore. Why would I call my vet out and have my horse measured? So I don't have the before and after ACTH levels on all of them, but I have plenty to say this, that the ACTH is a stress hormone, and we lower the stress hormone by taking the underlying stress away. So therefore, the horse doesn't have any PPID symptoms anymore. So what happened here is that very powerful competitors, and I have the names, I know exactly who it is. I'm not disclosing the names here because I would like this video to stay up on YouTube. So I experienced a witch hunt that started in 2015. And after a couple of cases got dismissed by me explaining to the veterinary board that I do nutrition, the main driver, this person behind this all, did not let go. and he is in an influential position in politics, in the government, and in some associations. And he kept driving this. So finally, the Department of Consumer Affairs gave in and launched an undercover investigation, just like they do for drug lords, right? Mafia or so. So they did the same thing. And in 2017, they set up this sting. And the stings are not to show you innocent. The stings are set up in a way for you to make mistakes. They are meant to mislead people. And what happened is they presented me with a case that with a completely healthy sport horse where everybody would say, oh, this horse has Cushing's, and they faked a Cushing's report. The person that was behind this faked the report, exchanged names and stuff to mislead me. And I have the audio recording. I have all this evidence, and it came to about several thousand pages in the administrative court hearing that I drove this to. But what happened is first it went to criminal court, and the Department of Consumer Affairs did a defamatory and slandering publication on me, and everybody that didn't like me went on and spread this out. And after the case got dismissed in 2018, I told the DCA to take the post down. It took him another 2 or 3 years to finally do this. And I think you cannot find this type of post today anymore. But basically what's described in here has not happened like this. I did not examine the horse, and I did not prescribe a treatment. What I did say is the horse needs salt and alfalfa. And in the administrative hearing, this was interpreted as a treatment, as medication. So there's a lot to say about how these processes go, but there were a lot of supporters that I had helped in the past. And again, here I blacked out their identity. This was a demonstration outside the California courthouse in October 2018. And thank you, my supporters. And they were thousands of people, but I was concerned that they would probably shut the whole courthouse down for that day. So I allowed a small circle peacefully to be there with me. H8 was the department. I didn't realize that goes into like another word, but it's H8 was the department. So in case you wonder about that. The judge, after a year of hearings, dismissed the case, but the veterinary boards were not happy. And then after the case got dismissed in 2018 and 2021, they sent me a citation that I took to administrative court in 2023, and that resulted into a penalty payment that I make payments on. They graciously gave me $1,000 discount from a $5,000 citation down to $4,000, because to buy the minutes to go to appeal would have been $5,000. So they figured if they give me a cheaper deal, I step away. But I will not stop helping you with your horses. So the hunt will go on. So what I'm asking from you is spread the word and be educated. And this information that's coming now is supposed to hopefully educate you more. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, call me, and text me. I am here for you. So the truth about PPID. Originally, it was called equine Cushing's. Commonly, we still say equine Cushing's today. That's an old definition. Until about 2007 and 2008, the pharmaceutical industry and some scientists decided to rename this disease. Why did they do this? Comes in a moment. A tumor of the pituitary gland, which elevates ACTH and cortisol levels. Now, what you need to know about these complicated words here is ACTH is a hormone that is made in the brain, which is called a stress hormone. And when there's stress in the body or in the mind of the horse's brain will release ACTH and will then initiate the adrenal glands to release cortisol. So in the case of a tumor, which I will show you subsequently here, the tumor is characterized that it will do whatever it wants to do. The tumor does what the tumor wants, and it will not listen to the rest of the body. So what happens here is that you really get these mammoth type long hair. No matter what you do, the ACTH levels are skyrocketing and the cortisol levels, and there are side effects from this particular situation. In this case, you really need to try to get the ACTH under control because it will not respond to anything else but medication. The thing is that a brain tumor in horses can happen, but it's very, very rare. So until about 2007 and 2008, those cases were like maybe 1 in 500 or something like this, or, 1 in 800 or something rare. Now, there's a drug that was formerly called Permax. Today it's called Prasent. And the ingredient is pergolide. And that medication was used in people to lower ACTH levels and cortisol levels. It's actually used in people. It was meant to be a Parkinson's disease medication. Now, here's a statement from UC Davis, so I can show you I'm not making this up. Cancer of the central nervous system is rare in horses. And this was in 2021. Now, in the meantime, Cushing's is not a brain tumor anymore because they renamed this. Let's talk about the ACTH because this is kind of a central expression here. The pituitary gland in the brain makes ACTH, and it's a stress hormone. ACTH stands for this: adrenal cortical. So this is an anatomical structure, the adrenal cortex. The adrenals are little glands sitting by the kidneys, adrenals, and they make cortisone in their cortex. This is why cortisone is called cortisone, because it comes from the cortex of the adrenal glands. So AC stands for adrenocortical. So it goes to the adrenocortical anatomical structure. It travels from the brain in the bloodstream to the kidney area, where in the blood it is a messenger hormone to tell the adrenals to grow, tropic. And the messenger structure, the messenger chemical is a hormone. So this is what ACTH stands for. It is a messenger hormone produced in the pituitary in the brain, meant to tell the adrenal glands to increase cortisol in times of war, flight or fight response. So cortisol brings the body into a flight or fight mode. PPI here stands really only for pars pituitary intermedia. So this is the Latin expression for the middle part of the pituitary. Pituitary here has 3 parts, and it's the second part, the middle part, pars intermedia, that makes the ACTH. So this is how it comes to PPID. So we're going to talk about this next. The treatment for equine Cushing's is pergolide. It got renamed into Prasent after it was called Permax for humans. This drug lowers ACTH levels by means of dopamine. So it's a dopamine agonist when you read this. It gets very complicated in the neurology, in the neurotransmitters, but by increasing the dopamine, it is lowering the ACTH levels. And with that, it is meant to lower cortisol levels. Now, this is very important. So the intention here is to lower cortisol levels when the cortisol levels are actually elevated. Okay, it's very important. You don't want to lower cortisol levels when they're already low. So here it becomes very important to do the right thing. Today's state-of-the-art Cushing's test is ACTH testing. So what the veterinarian will do is they will go and say, oh, has your horse had his or her personal pronoun here, Cushing's test yet? It's kind of like you go to the pharmacy and say, and they will ask you, have you had your flu shot yet? I don't own a flu shot. I'm not interested. But it makes me feel like a little bit guilty because I should have what's mine, right? I should own what's mine. So if your horse didn't have his or her Cushing's test yet, it's about time. Now, I'm saying this sarcastically because here's the point. If you only test the ACTH without the cortisol, how do you know the cortisol is actually high? Because if you only test one thing, you don't have the result on the other, unless you make an assumption. So the common belief here is that elevated cortisol levels make laminitis. So this is the fear in everybody's mind, and this is also what the vet will tell you is, oh, if you don't test this, your horse might get laminitis because Cushing's can make laminitis. First of all, there are studies that completely speak against that. And second, not the ACTH in itself doesn't make laminitis. There are theories also unproven actually, that body-owned cortisol elevation can make laminitis. But the cortisol nowadays does not get measured anymore when somebody tests for Cushing's. Only the ACTH, and then there's a modified ACTH test with a thyroid hormone where it gets even more convoluted. But the main thing is that the cortisol does not get measured. The cortisol is simply assumed to be high when the ACTH is high. And I'm going to show you here now why this is an incorrect assumption. So it means basically the drug is prescribed based on an assumption which might not be true. Well, what do we care? You know, what happens actually to a horse when we give the wrong drug? In this particular case or scenario, if a horse with undetected low cortisol levels gets a drug that lowers cortisol levels even more, such as pergolide, the horse will suffer and symptoms worsen from not treating the cause and by producing side effects. There is a condition in humans where humans have cortisol levels that are too low, and that condition is called Addison's disease. Like one famous example would be Kennedy had Addison's disease. And those people have to take medications every day, otherwise they die, or they are, to the least, they're miserable because their immune system completely collapses. They get weird skin infections. They are completely lethargic. They cannot do anything. You cannot do much in your life when your cortisol is running low. Here's an example in a picture when what I often see in horses that are on pergolide, and I know their cortisol levels are low, and sometimes I can convince the horse owner or the veterinarian to test their cortisol levels, because what happens here is the skin fungi are everywhere, and those horses get a very, very itchy skin fungus and very uncomfortable. They are itchy beyond measure, and nothing will help. You cannot get rid of this fungus because the cortisol levels are notoriously low and healing processes are disabled. So let's look at different scenarios that can influence this balance between ACTH and cortisol. Here are normal interactions. So how do you got to imagine it this way. It's kind of like a feedback mechanism. Everything in the body is counter-regulated and measured. It's kind of like an air conditioner or heating. There's a sensor somewhere in the room that measures the temperature that should be, right? And if it goes up or down, it will give feedback with the sensor. And the sensor here is usually the bloodstream. There are sensors in the body that measure the cortisol level. And in a normal balance, there is a balance between ACTH and cortisol. Now, what happens is when there's a tumor, remember I said it's rare, the tumor will uncontrollably, and that tumor is in the pituitary, right? It's supposed to sit in pituitary in the brain. It's a brain tumor. It will now take over control, and it will uncontrollably produce ACTH. No matter what's going on here on the other side, the tumor will not listen. The tumor is completely by itself. It does not listen to the rest of the body. So what happens here then is that the ACTH levels skyrocket, and it will instruct the adrenals to make cortisone, and there is no healthy feedback mechanism. This green arrow here should actually be non-existent. I need to take this out because there is no feedback. There is feedback, but the tumor doesn't listen. So there should be a cross here because the tumor is not interested. The tumor does what the tumor wants to do. So this is the only application that makes sense to give a medication that lowers ACTH levels. And how would you find this out? How would you find out if your horse actually is in this situation? Well, you measure the ACTH and you measure the cortisol. Makes sense, right? Both extremely high. Well, we have an issue. So only in a tumor, the cortisol is dangerously high. what's considered dangerously, into Cushing's. Now, when the horse is stressed, the cortisol levels can go up, but they are not permanently up. They're up for a moment or a day. When the stressor goes down, then the cortisol goes down, but they're never that extremely high, as high as they were measured in true brain tumor cases. The message here is, when measuring ACTH, we should also measure cortisol to see if we actually have elevated cortisol levels. And when they're not elevated, why would I try to get the ACTH down symptomatically? I would try to take the underlying stressor down, right? So here's the most common case that I have encountered. And here is why I am doing this whole presentation and why this approach has been successful and why competitors do not like this. The common cause has nothing to do with Cushing's. The common cause for ACTH levels to go up is actually this. This is a proven mechanism in human medicine. Unfortunately, there's not enough money in equine research or not enough interest, or it's blocked in the roots whenever anybody comes up and wants to go that route because there is no money in addressing this. Here is the problem. The ACTH might go up because there's not enough cortisone, because there is a condition called adrenal fatigue. And what happens is when the adrenals are under chronic stress or when the adrenals age, the adrenal cortex will get thinner, and the cortisone production will go down. And what happens now is because the cortisone production goes down, remember the air condition cycle or the heating cycle, it will report this to the brain and the ACTH will go up. But if the adrenals are unable to make enough cortisone, the ACTH will stay up. So how would we actually treat this, address this root cause? We would recover the adrenals, and there is several natural ways of doing this. And in all the cases you have seen previously in this presentation, this is exactly what we did. We removed the underlying stress factor from the horse, and then we addressed adrenal recovery with adaptogenic herbs and a baseline nutrition program that feeds the adrenals. And in about 60 to 90 days, voila, those measures are normal. So now again, how do I know that I have this situation? I don't know until I measure the cortisol levels. If I only measure the ACTH, I always get the same picture. ACTH is up, right? So now, here's why we have so much push from the pharmaceutical industry. Universities in general do not have enough money to provide continued education to graduates, to veterinarians or doctors. And this is why, so gracefully, the pharmaceutical industry has taken over for continued education. They sponsor these nice events and they do all these things, and they sponsor organizations like associations and all this. So they have a big, big influence here on all kinds of governmental agencies and associations that have influence on veterinarians and research. In 2007, the FDA, in a rush action, banned pergolide from the human market because people were dying from it. Why were they dying? Because they got something called a valvulopathy. And the valvulopathy is a heart condition where the heart valves start dysfunctioning, and ultimately the heart malfunctions and just stops or does whatever leads to death. Now, this medication was given to Parkinson's patients, and usually those patients are older already, so they do not tolerate problems with the heart very well. So now you can imagine what happened. Out of a sudden, overnight, this drug became a trash product after they had invested millions and millions of dollars. So what to do? How can we recover our losses? Interestingly enough, Time-wise, very close to after the drug got banned from human use, the industry focused on ways to increase the use in horses. Because Cushing's was known as a rare brain tumor, it got renamed into an unspecific dysfunction. Now, what you need to know is dys in the Latin syllable means just off, right? There are syllables that regulate the over or under, like hyper, I hope, hypo, or para to the side. But this just means we don't know what it is, but it's just not right. So this now all of a sudden made this whole thing very unspecific. What happened here is it got disconnected to the whole tumor ethology before. And with that, all of a sudden, there was this open window to increase those cases by gradually adding more symptoms to the definition of PPID, pars pituitary intermediate dysfunction. There's also no brain test that can test this. There's the only way to identify a horse that has PPID is they measure the ACTH levels. And when the ACTH levels are up, then routinely the state of the art is to give medication. So here's the announcement from the company that produces this medication. And this is my comment up here, how to recuperate the losses. Cushing's disease has a new name, condition previously referred to as equine Cushing's, now called PPID, for greater, specification or whatever of the endocrine system. And this now all of a sudden made this whole thing more vague. So here again, pars pituitary intermediate dysfunction. What I call PPID is pharmaceutically promoted incorrect diagnosis. That is just me. Boehringer then announced, we can ID PPID. And what they did is they offered the test free to veterinarians. And the veterinarians then either can tell the horse owner the test is for free, or they can just bill the horse owner for the test and make a little bit of profit on the testing that is free, done by those pergolide makers. And the intent here was to get more horses onto the medication so it can be sold more. Now they're saying, okay, you know what? We don't have enough market share here yet. We're going to expand the market. It used to be only old horses, but we want more of the market share. Now we're deciding PPID can affect any horse, and in rare cases, horses as young as 5 years old. Why is this a problem? Well, there are side effects from the medication, especially if given when it's not needed. Remember, you want more benefits and side effects. And if you give the medication without the benefit, what commonly is said that all the side effects are actually the Cushing's being progressing. Oh, that's just the Cushing getting worse. Thankfully, we have the medication, so this process is slowed down. You know, otherwise your horse would not be alive anymore. So that's usually what we hear. Loss of appetite is used usually to have obese horses lose weight. They just get so stomach sick they don't want to eat anymore. Recurrent infection, I showed you the picture of the skin fungus, but also, you know, EPM skyrockets. Oh yeah, that comes with PPID. Your horse's immune system doesn't work correctly. Skin fungus, itchiness, decreased performance because your horse just gets what they call so gracefully pergolide veil. There's a lot of reports online. Why is my horse so absent? Or he's with the fairies, some say, right? The horse is just not present anymore. They are under some sort of, in some sort of state of mind that is not connected to reality. And sometimes those horses also get really, really spooky. I had a horse owner who broke her shoulder because her always very peaceful horse, it was a third day on pergolide, he spun around, saw a ghost, and ripped her arm out, or enough for the shoulder to break. Tendon and suspensory ligament laxity, you need cortisol in the body to have this, you know, skeletal-muscular integrity. You need cortisol for performance and all this. Rounded extended abdomen from bloating because the pergolide will produce stomach problems, and it will enable nutrition that should be absorbed in the foregut now get into the hindgut, and the horse gets bloated and gets colicky and all this. Again, these are all then interpreted as Cushing's symptoms. We talked about the veil, and then I think it's still on the leaflet. If you look at the small print, it will say in number 4, death. So that's a side effect that's listed on the leaflet. So what do you do with all this information now? So here's my message to you. When your veterinarian comes to do the ACTH test, and it's almost like a routine annual now for horses over 10 or under 10, or what it really depends on the colleague. Also ask them to test for cortisol, because if the cortisol levels are not elevated, why would you have to give a drug that lowers the cortisol levels? So you need to have both parts of the information to make an educated decision. If you only have one part of the information, you have a not even educated guess. The cortisol, and then you also want to test for thyroid hormones. Thyroid hormones are T for thyroid 4 and T3. Those two hormones are different in that one is the inactive form, the T4 that the thyroid makes, and the T3 is the active form that the horse will use in the cell. The horse will convert the T4 into the T3 in their body cell, and some horses don't convert. There's currently no medication for T3, but you can naturally boost T3 levels very easily with iodine supplements, kelp, iodine tablets, and that works really great. I just got a report back from a horse that's currently at a clinic on the East Coast for other reasons, and they measured the horse's T3, and it was really high because she had given, with my recommendation, had given thyroid boosting kelp, and that really worked. We could see it in the numbers. Now, I am not, and here again, I'm not accusing or being against my veterinary colleagues. I am attempting to educate everybody and to ask them to cooperate and re-question, re-evaluate, because most horses and most horse owners are not happy with their horse's conditions after they are put on the medication, and the others just simply don't know and believe that it could be the Cushing's condition that really makes them so miserable. And another thing is also, if your horse, again, has laminitis, you have to do what needs to be done. You need the medication, you need everything that can help your horse be comfortable. At the same time, you can go on search, on quest for the root cause, start a nutritional program. I've currently like 3 or 4 laminitic horses all over the country, where I work with veterinarians and they do the medication and then we retest together. And that's very rewarding for all of us. And the horse owner has, you really have this reassurance that you have a whole team around your horse that works together. Now, what else can you do? Check for underlying root causes. Example, hair analysis. This hair is from the mane of the horse. It is not pulled like for a DNA analysis, it's cut. And I get those hair samples all over the world. They ship very easily because they don't have to be preserved or anything. They're good in my drawer for half a year. And you can see this laboratory will provide us with an endocrine index. And why is that? Because they test what's called the tissue mineral analysis. And the composition and balance and levels of the minerals give a secondary indication. They're secondary markers for organ functions, and they give us an indication. And this actually is pretty correct. When I saw this the first time, I wasn't sure if I should believe this, but then we started recovering the adrenal glands, and they actually will follow. So we do repeat hair analysis after 6 months, say, and we can see how the adrenals have come up. I had one horse that responded within like 4 or 5 weeks. We had to redo the hair analysis because there was a weird heavy metal toxicity finding in the hair that proved itself correct, but the horse owner wanted the hair tested again. And we did it again, and the adrenals already had come up significantly. I was thrilled to see that. So normally I don't do another hair analysis after 5 weeks because we wait for the old hair to grow out. You can also in the hair analysis check mineral levels, but I don't have the graph here in this presentation. So take home message, and then we're going to go into the Q&A. So first of all, safety first. If your horse has laminitis or is in an endocrine crisis or has extremely high insulin levels, this has nothing to do with Cushing's. It is something that has to do with the pancreas. You will need to medicate with whatever your vet gives you, and then you can test for the root causes, right? So this is not against medication. It is for medication when it is indicated. If there is no laminitis, you might want to consider removing the root causes, and also always ask questions. Ask your veterinarian questions. Why do you want me to do this for my horse? I just want to understand. If testing for Cushing's, when testing for Cushing's, it should say, ask your vet to also test the thyroid hormones and cortisol as well. So there are no assumptions and misdiagnostics going on. Ask your vet questions why he or she wants your horse on the medication. And if they say, oh, because when the ACTH is high, the cortisol is high, you can say, how do you know the cortisol is high? Have we tested it? And the vet will say, no, we don't do this anymore. Well, then you say, well, how do you know it's high? If we don't from the market, right, change happens from the end user on, we have to request the change, because otherwise, for the last 10, 15 years, nobody ever has put pressure against this. We will not have a change in this procedure, in this process. And it is time now, because the amount of horses that get put on the drug has skyrocketed. Now, this is not just a horse problem. We're having a safety problem as well, because now they're diagnosing sport performance horses with Cushing's, and they're putting the horses on percent, and now they are trying to get through that sport horses can compete in the FEI and USEF with that medication in their system. And I think it's long overdue that something needs to be done here. Then, according to, coming back to root causes, there's a lot of stress factors that can be in your horse's diet. Balancing the diet and local minerals, balancing those is very important.